welcome to the Ernest Faison Show. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored because it's been a minute. I've got a man who I consider to be one of my mentors. You know him, you love him, put your hands together for Mr. Jim Vincent.
Well, Ernest, it's a pleasure. You said that exactly the way I wrote it. So
That's
you're
right.
good. You're a good man.
So you'll pay me later?
I'll pay you later. As they say, the check is in the mail.
That's right. Ladies and gentlemen, just a little history. I started doing this about 15, 17, 20 years ago, and our mentor, Mr. George Castro, God rest his soul, he had a show called Now's the Time, and this gentleman here, Mr. Jim Vincent, was hosting the show. And of course, Jim would be a man who's upwardly mobile, so Jim went on to greener pastures. And one day, Jim was not in the studio. Hark! What happened? Mr. Castro squirming around. He looks at me. I got a fleece on now. I'm not like in my Gucci, Uchi, Ilarucci like I am now. By the way, nice tie.
Thank you.
So he goes, Ernest, Jim's not here. I need somebody to host the show. Now, mind you, Jim is, I told you, I consider him to be a mentor. So hence, I got the bug. So Jim, won't you take it from there?
Well, you're being very kind because the way I remember it happening, Mr. Castro, the Honorable George Castro,
yes,
gave me
God
an
rest his soul.
God rest his soul. He gave me an opportunity in 2000 when I was the president of the Urban League.
Yes, sir.
I was a guest on his show, and he liked me so much that he told me that he wanted me to be the host of his show the following week.
Right, okay.
And
I didn't know this.
Yeah, and I said, well, what about your host? He said, well, don't worry about that. Let me worry about that.
Yes, sir.
I want you to be the host. I said, I've never done TV before. He said,
Okay.
don't worry about that. Don't worry. Just show up and you'll be okay. So he had a lot of confidence because I was trying to tell him something, but he didn't want to hear it. He said, I want you to be the new host. I got a feeling about you. And he told me the same thing 2 years later. He said, I got a feeling about Ernest. I want him to be the host. And I said, what am I going to do? He said, I don't know.
So he was two-timing us.
I said, well, I like TV. He said, well, that's your problem. And then he said, but what I would do, if you want to continue in TV and do your own show, I'll help you do your own show. But you're out as far as now's the time. Ernest is the new host.
That's
But
right.
if you want to do a new show, I'll help you. And he helped me. So in June of 2002, I launched the Jim Vincent Show.
Okay.
And you were
so
doing
it
Now's
was
the Time.
out with the old and in with the new.
He was that kind of guy. And he said, Jim,
Yes, he
you should understand.
was. Yes, he was.
He said, Jim, you should understand it better than anybody.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, you know who this man is. He's been all around. He is the head of the NAACP. But before that, I don't want to put the cart before that, Jim. Why don't you tell the people under the sound of my voice how it is that you actually came to Rhode Island from Boston?
All right. Well, you know, I had been born and raised in Boston, in the south end of Boston. And I lived there until I went to college. I went to school at Dartmouth College in New Hampshire.
Mm-hmm.
Then I immediately went into graduate school at the University of Pennsylvania. So I spent 6 years outside of Boston, but I couldn't get a job in Philadelphia. I wanted to stay in Philly. I really liked Philly. So I did
You
put
like Philly?
I loved Philly.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, and we're talking about the mid-'70s now.
Mm-hmm.
So unfortunately, or fortunately, I was able to get a job at the Boston Redevelopment Authority, my first job out of planning school. I was a senior planner for the Roxbury neighborhood, a neighborhood where I went to high school in.
Yes.
And that's how I launched my career. So I was there for about 15 years, but I really didn't think I was able to do the kinds of things that I wanted to do. There was a lot of discrimination in Boston. There was a lot of tribalism in that city, and I just didn't feel comfortable in terms of my advancement.
Because I know South Boston, there were issues already there.
Issues there for decades. But,
For decades, correct.
and I'm from the South End,
Okay.
which is a neighboring neighborhood. So I was frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to get out after 15 years working in Boston, and I didn't intend to come to Rhode Island, but when the opportunity presented itself to come to East Providence to be their housing coordinator, I jumped on it. And one of the things that was ironic is that I grew up in an entirely African-American community.
Yes.
My family is from Cape Verde.
Right.
My father is actually an immigrant from Cape Verde. My mother was born in Connecticut. Her parents are from Cape Verde.
Yeah.
But I never lived around Cape Verdeans.
And you do like Kachu.
Well, we used to call Manchu.
Manchu. And I get corrected all the time on
Yeah.
that.
Well, that's a whole show in itself. We're not
Yes,
going
it
to talk
is.
about that tonight.
Go ahead.
That's a whole show. So anyway, I, thought it would be interesting living in a community where there was a lot of Cape Verdeans, as well as have the housing coordinator's job in the city of East Providence. So I came in 1990 and was welcomed, felt comfortable, and I decided to make this my home. So I've been here now about 30 years, and it's been great. It's been great. Rhode Island has been great for me. I left Boston a little bit concerned about my future and found a home here. So, I think in 1993, somebody asked me to be on the Urban League board. So that gave me a taste of advocacy in terms of Rhode Island. I like that. I ended up being the president of the Urban League from 1999 to 2001. And then when I left, I decided to go to the sister advocacy group, which was the NAACP.
Right, which is the perfect segue that I was going to ask you, Jim. By the way, you are watching PEG RITV, the Ernest Faison Show. I'm honored to have one of my mentors, Mr. Jim Vincent. You guys have seen him many, many times. So we're talking all things Rhode Island and his journey through life. And now we're going to speak on what he's very, very adamant about and passionate about. That would be the NAACP. So continue with that.
Yeah, so I joined NAACP in 2003 and just was another member. I wasn't even on the executive committee until around 2006 or so. But once, I got on the executive committee under the Honorable Cliff Montero. Who lives in Florida now, doing well. It got serious for me, and I knew that when Cliff retired, he wanted me to be his successor. The election of 2010, December, I became the president. So I've now completed my 11th year with the NAACP, which is the oldest and largest civil rights organization in America. We're all volunteers. Nobody gets paid.
Yes.
And it's been a labor of love because I've been welcomed by Rhode Islanders. So wherever I am, that's my home.
Can you please tell the people on the sound of my voice what the NAACP stands for?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I try not to use acronyms, but I use that one so much that you're right. I should explain. It's the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. NAACP, founded in 1909 in Niagara Falls, New York. And Providence is one of the oldest branches.
Okay.
The Providence branch was formed in 1913. So we've been around the city of Providence and the state of Rhode Island for the last almost 9 years.
So when there are injustices done, the NAACP is always around.
Well, I try to be. Whenever I hear of anything, and there was a couple of things even today, I try to advocate for the people that call the office. We pride ourselves on being the voice of the voiceless.
Yes.
And, we try to use leverage, we try to use relationships to affect change.
Yeah.
And so it's like anything else. We're just committed volunteers that believe in trying to make sure that there's equity, inclusion, and we fight against racism and bigotry and discrimination. And we just believe in it maybe a little bit more than most people and have organized ourselves in such a way that we meet once a month, the third Thursday of the month at 6 o'clock, and we urge everybody to join.
And I'm so glad that we're speaking about this. And can you put some clarity to this misnomer that there are people who don't look like us, a la Caucasian people, who are also members of the NAACP?
The NAACP was founded by an interracial group in New York.
This is important because a lot of people think it's just strictly black people.
Well, you're right about that. A lot of people do. I think most people don't. They realize that it isn't. We have, in terms of our founders, I'm not sure if it was half the founders were white or how many founders were white.
This is very important here.
But certainly it was an interracial group from the very beginning. And even today, we have 2,200 branches in the country. Many of those branches have white presidents. We have branches in Vermont, Maine, New Hampshire.
Which are typically more Caucasian folks.
Well, sure, you know. And so there's presidents in those areas that believe in the NAACP mission and bylaws and principles and guidelines, and follow the same mantra that we follow here in Providence. So we're excited that we have a multicultural, multiracial assortment of people. Because
inclusion.
We seek inclusion in every aspect of American life. So we, of course, want to practice that ourselves.
That's right. Practice what you preach. Jim, so that was very eloquently said, and I appreciate you for shining some light on that as only you can. So here is a very good question, and this is almost parallel to what you were talking about. We've got these new offshoots now, BLM. What is your thought process for those who don't know Black Lives Matter?
Well, there's two organizations.
And I am asking you an opinion. I'm not
Sure,
asking you to judge them.
No, there are two organizations in Rhode Island, Black Lives
Yes.
Matter. One is, headed by Gary Danzlinger, and the other one, the executive director is Harrison Tuttle. And I get along with both of them. So I mean, I get along with everybody. I mean, back 50 years ago when Martin Luther King was marching, I mean, you had SNCC, CORE, you had Southern Leadership Christian Organization,
SCLC.
NAACP. You had like a dozen organizations all working towards the same goal, working differently, and maybe not working exactly together, but they were working towards the same
Common goal, yeah.
So we have the same today. So I welcome any organization that's.
Do you think they're doing yeoman's work, or do you think that they're not inclusionary? Because
I don't judge. I don't judge.
Well said. Well said.
I don't judge. I work with people that want to work with me.
Okay.
And that's fine. And I got a call today from Harrison, for example, about an issue. And so we're working on an issue together. So, so that just shows you right today that, the NAACP, we work with whoever is trying to work for the community and do it in a very respectful way.
Do you think BLM, Black Lives Matter, do you think that their core values are intact based on what you've seen? Again, this is not judgment now. I'm just asking you just for...
I look at Black Lives Matter two ways. One, there's an organization called Black Lives Matter. I don't know that much about the national organization.
Okay.
I think it was founded by 4 women. I'm not sure. I'm not quite sure what the status is today. And there are different Black Lives Matter organizations in different states. I don't know a lot about it. I just know about the NAACP.
Right, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on it.
So as far as I know, I really can't speak on it because I really don't know. The other part of Black Lives Matter is I think that we all are part of Black Lives Matter. If you believe that all lives matter.
All lives matter.
However, there are people out there that don't believe that Black Lives Matter, which is the problem.
Okay.
See, we wouldn't have to say Black Lives Matter if people believe that all lives matter, including Black lives. But not everybody,
I like that.
But not everybody believes that Black Lives Matter because we see it every day in terms of police brutality,
I see bumper stickers, Blue Lives Matter. You're watching PEG TV, the Ernest Faison Show. We're getting into the meat and potatoes of it. We're not going to fake the funk. We're going to give it to you uncut and direct. Like you say, Strawberry Leonard number 23.
Yeah, well, Blue Lives, it didn't matter when they had the January 6th insurrection. They didn't really get supported by the so-called people that say Blue Lives Matter. If anything, they were condemning the police on that day. So there's a hypocrisy in everything, and I guess we saw it on full display on January 6th.
January 6th.
But I don't comment on other organizations because, I have my hands full with the NAACP. I'm just trying to do the best job I can leading this legacy organization that is the oldest and largest civil rights organization in the country with 2,200 branches in the United States.
And that's why I call you the hardest working man, can't say in show business, in the business.
That's James Brown.
Not only that, you are also doing RIPTA, and that's a full-time gig.
Well, RIPTA, and that's an acronym, that's Rhode Island Public Transit Authority.
Yes.
I am the outreach officer for the authority.
Yes.
And so I try to make sure that every and all organizations that I know about, and even some I don't, know how we operate. I mean, we have fixed route, we have paratransit, we have, we did certain things during the pandemic that people might not know about in terms of working with Meals on Wheels as well as working with.
That's a beautiful thing there.
Well, we had to because a lot of shut-ins, record amount of shut-ins, as well as working with the plant in North Smithfield that was manufacturing the N95 masks.
Okay.
And now their name escapes me. I can't remember the name of the company right now. However, we worked in terms of access to that plant for people that needed masks as well as the employees. So there was a lot of things that we were doing over the last year in terms of RIPTA. However, I also do a TV show. I'm also on other boards. So I have a full life.
You do.
I have a full life.
And I don't want seconds, Jim. That's a different show there.
Yeah, that's a whole different show.
Yes, it is. Yes, Jim. Let me keep going. This is near and dear to my heart, and I'm gonna look at my buddy here. You're watching PEG TV, the Ernest Faison Show. Thanks for coming in. We got my friend, Mr. Jim Vincent, and we're speaking about all things Jim, all things Ernest, and just our experience and our friendship over what, 20 years?
It's like
just
20
about.
years. I mean, I met you during when I was hosting the
That's right.
show. It was between 2000 and 2002. So I don't know if you came in at 2001 or whatever.
Yeah, like 2002. So here's another pretty good question. You spoke about the NAACP, and that's a very prestigious organization. I want your view on Joe Biden, and when he said that one of the promises that he was going to make was that he was going to nominate a woman of color, African descent. Your thought on that, and do you think he should have used the words more diversity on the court, or?
No, I think he did it right. He said what he meant, and he meant what he said. He was going to appoint a black woman to the court.
Yeah.
And it's long overdue.
Yeah.
I mean, the number of qualified black women.
Because Justice Thomas is the only.
He's the only black person.
Black person.
You know, and that was 30 years ago that he was appointed.
Yeah.
But the amount of qualified black women is staggering.
Yeah.
And yet they're constantly has been overlooked over the last 20 years.
Correct.
Despite their qualifications, they've been overlooked for 20 years.
And not as a status quo. I just want to get that
overlooked.
out. Yeah, it's
More
because
qualified,
they have the qualifications.
More qualified
Yeah.
in a lot of cases, and
Yeah.
overlooked for 20 years.
And that's big.
So that's an
what
injustice.
I wanted to get apart.
So this is an injustice that's being corrected for the sake of all America. Because you know, whenever you have an organization that is diverse, you have a diversity of thought, diversity of opinion, which means that it's more of a collaborative and group, which means you're going to get better decisions. Whenever you have a more collegial kind of a group where people can bring in their life experiences, in any kind of group, you're going to get better decisions. And we're more important than the Supreme Court, which makes ultimate decisions in terms of how the country is governed. So it's about time, and I would say that I've heard of 3, 6, 10, 12 candidates. I would put their resumes against all 9 justices that are there now, and we'll see who's got better resumes. Probably the better resumes would be these black women that are being talked about than the people that are on the Supreme Court now. If you looked at their resume going into the court, their resumes probably was not as good.
Well, Kavanaugh's a little suspect, first of all.
He's not as qualified as any of the people being mentioned in terms of that seat.
That in itself. We know what that is.
Not by a long shot.
Yeah, we know what that is, and we won't even give it airtime.
So the question was, what do I think of it? Long overdue, and I think that he is making history in the right direction, because we need the Supreme Court to be reflective of the country, to look like the country.
Of the country.
Because then you make your best decisions, because you have diversity of thought.
Correct.
That go into a decision. So
I like that.
I applaud it.
Yeah, I do as well. Because some people are saying, well, why wouldn't you just say diversity? No, just say it like it is.
Say it like it is.
Say it like it is.
You know, when
people will respect you when you say it like it is.
When Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump said what they were going to do, they said, they were going to pick a white woman. They didn't say white. You didn't have to say it. It was understood.
It just so happened that she's Caucasian.
No, well, you knew that.
They did. They did.
Right, no, but what they did, I mean, Ronald Reagan said, I'm going to pick a woman. Well, that was understood. That was going to be a white woman.
Yes.
We knew that there was not going to be a woman of color picked by Ronald Reagan. He said it, and nobody even said boo. The same people that are complaining now said nothing when he said it.
Agreed.
So so like I said, hypocrisy is something.
Hey, look, if you can't stand the heat, you need to get out the kitchen. It's true. Ladies and gentlemen, PEG, RITV. That's Jim Vincent. This is Ernest Faison. That's my paisan. Been knowing him a long time. It's informal right now, but we are getting into the meat and potatoes of it. The questions that you at home would want me to ask this man here. So you've told me about where the NAACP came from. You told me about where they were. Tell me where they're going.
Well, right now in Providence, I'm the state coordinator. We have another branch, Newport County. The president's Jimmy Winters. The key thing that we're focused on is the legislation called Let RI Vote. Okay, Let RI Vote.
Okay.
That would codify in Rhode Island law some of the things you saw during the pandemic. No excuse mail balloting, drop boxes, early voting, and hopefully.
Like what's happening down there in Georgia.
Well, that's the opposite. They're engaging in voter suppression and voter subversion.
Okay.
Trying to down there. We want to do the opposite of that.
Correct.
We want to increase the democracy, not decrease democracy.
Right.
Because if you decrease democracy too much, you get authoritarianism.
Agree.
We don't want that.
No.
So we don't want that. We want what we're trying to do here. We're trying to increase participation, increase the democracy for everybody. And there's ways of doing it through legislation.
And what steps are you taking to do
Well,
that?
we are going to be supporting some legislation that you're going to hear about this month at the State House that would do things like same-day registration, not just for the presidential election, but for all elections. Right now, during the presidential election, you can actually register to vote same day. Register and vote same day. And a lot of people don't know that. But we want it to be for all races, okay? Open up the democracy, open up the participation, and mail-in ballots where you don't have to have notary publics, 2 notaries or whatever. You know, that we find is unnecessary. Open up the process and let people have the convenience of voting. A lot of people can't vote on election day because they're working 2, 3 jobs, okay? So we don't want any barriers to the franchise, to democracy, to voting. So that's probably the number one thing we're working on. But another thing we're working on is the SNAP incentive program to help food stamp recipients buy fruits, SNAP, which is the food stamp program.
Yeah.
We want them to be able to buy fruits and vegetables, which are very expensive. You go to the Whole Food stores, the more healthy foods are the more expensive foods.
You're saying they can't do it now?
Right now they can do it, but it costs an arm and a leg. Wouldn't it be good if they could pay 50% for fruits and vegetables?
Okay,
With the state picking up the tab,
The second half.
The second half. So we want to push that through legislation, I guess, because the governor does not have it in his budget. So hopefully we can get that program up and running so that people that are the poorest of the poor that are on food stamps can have a healthy diet. Why is that important? Because when you don't have a healthy diet, all of a sudden diabetes and hypertension happens. You get costly hospital stays and it plays havoc.
Which is the perfect segue. Excuse me, what did you think about Dr. Alexander stepping down?
Well,
I thought she did a wonderful job.
She did a fantastic job
navigating us through COVID.
She did a fantastic job, and I'm sorry that she's stepping down.
Yeah.
Sorry that she's stepping down, but she's made that decision.
Correct.
And you know, she did a fantastic job. So I was happy to see her. And I'm part of the Equity Council, so I work with people in her office and also other state agencies. I've been working with them for the last 2 years throughout the pandemic through the Rhode Island Equity Council. So I'm a little closer up than some others in terms of the work.
Do you see South Providence making some type economical resurgence, as it were, because that area typically has been kind of depressed there a little bit. I mean, do you see it come up?
Well, actually, I mean, you know, you have a lot of immigration in South Providence, and if you look at Broad Street or whatever, it's really invigorated with the shops and the businesses that are there. Of course, you know, we're looking at business retention. Some people, because of the pandemic, have gone out of business.
Yeah.
And then we need access to capital. We need less discrimination so that people can have businesses that not just survive but can thrive. So yeah, we want to help the business community. We want to make sure that education is done better. We have one of the worst public school systems in the country.
Is that right?
Think about that, Providence.
No, I never knew that.
It's one of the worst in the country.
I lived in Hawaii, and I knew Hawaii was constantly in the top 5. I didn't know.
Providence is in one of the worst public school systems in the nation.
For years?
For years. Well, at least the last 2 years since the Hopkins study. I'm citing the Hopkins study. Said that Providence is one of the worst public school systems in the country. Now, I went to the Boston public schools, and they weren't that great. There was a book written, Death at an Early Age, The Destruction of the Hearts and Minds of the Negro Children in the Boston public schools. I was in the 10th grade when Jonathan Colson wrote that book. So Boston was bad. These schools are worse than that. They're horrific.
And they're old.
Well, the Boston schools are old too. But the quality is not there. Kids are basically not on grade level. Maybe, I think there was a statistic, only 3% of 8th graders can read on an 8th grade level. 3%.
Yeah.
3. We can't. You're not going to have a revitalized Rhode Island with those statistics because businesses don't come to a state unless there's a trained, motivated, and educated labor force. If you don't have an educated labor force, taxes, you can have no taxes. They're not going to come. You got to have those workers that can do the job.
And we do have a labor shortage.
So we're missing the boat on that.
Now.
We're missing the boat in education.
Yeah.
We have to do better.
A mind is a terrible thing to waste.
So you said you deal with education, you deal with small business, incentives so that people can participate fully in terms of the capitalist society. Those are 2 things that could help a lot in terms of not just South Providence, but the state as a whole.
In general. Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, you are watching PEG RITV. I got the maestro, Mr. Jim Vincent, one of my own personal mentors on the show. So we're gonna dial it back for you for a quick minute. We talked about the NAACP. We talked about how he actually became a part of Rhode Island and all of his prowesses. So Jim is a person like me who has multifaceted interests. We do know, my brother, that, and we're getting short on time, so we're gonna do some real quick stuff. You're a drummer. Get a drummer song.
That's right. A lot of people don't know that. You exposed that.
Yes, I did.
Last time I was on your show a couple of years ago.
Yes, I did.
I have to admit, I was in the orchestra, the Prince School Orchestra, which was, for me, my middle school. And I was in the orchestra for those 2 years, 7th and 8th grades, and played the drums.
All right, so I'm gonna move on. This man went to school now. He corrects me. He went to school, the same school, Dartmouth, with Meryl Streep.
Meryl Streep. Yeah, you exposed that the last time I was here.
I did.
Meryl Streep was an exchange student from Vassar University, Vassar College.
Yeah.
When she was a junior, and I was a freshman.
All right,
And
that's
so,
good enough. So
yeah.
we're gonna keep it moving. All right, so Quirk,
Oh,
the runner.
John Quirk.
Yeah, real quick.
Yeah, well, you know, your guy here, Mr. Holly.
I hit you with it.
John Quirk went to BC High and was the fastest guy in Boston, but he got beat. He
There
got
you
beat
go.
by Providence's own Holly.
All right, Mr. Hollywood, my #1 guy. All right, time is running short. I want to ask you, who's gonna win the Super Bowl?
You know, I haven't thought about it too much. It's going to be interesting because you got two teams that people didn't have thought were going to be there.
That's right,
The
Joe
Rams,
Burrow.
the Rams and the Bengals.
I know.
I think the Bengals are going to win this.
I love to see that. I'd love to see that because
AFC, baby.
That's right. That's right. Them cowgirls. What we have here is a failure to communicate. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been fun, but I've got to run. I've had my mentor, Mr. Jim Vincent, NAACP extraordinaire, citizen to the citizen. Jim, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for gracing me with the pleasure.
Anytime. You're my main man. You know
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, take care of yourself. God bless. That man's so bad he make medicine sick.
That's Muhammad Ali.
Yes, it is. Take care.
Bling, 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 bling. He's a Rastaman do his thing. You see, he got bling, 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 bling. Hey, laddie man. Some people have golden diamond ring. Driving around with spinning rims.